Órale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin and Familia. We're live on YouTube. Please, por favor, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a subscribe, por favor. Familia FFB on YouTube. We're right there for you. Estamos aquí para servirlos, help you with your fantasy with a little bit of sabor latino. And Familia, we're also, good stuff happening for us. Go to Underdog.com. Use the promo code Familia23. You're going to get a match up to 100. The best ball games out there. I mean, you're just going to have a blast. We're going to talk. We've been talking about it a little bit. We are going to be talking about it that much more all through the off season. Get you ready for your drafts. Best ball. It's a great way to practice for those drafts that are going to be happening in September. In August and September. So, and lastly, also, we are a proud member of the Fantasy Points Media Group, Familia. Get your 2023 subscription. It's going to take you all the way to the Super Bowl. Get the best of the best. You got John Hansen. You got Graham Barfield. His yards created is coming out. Scott Barrett. His look at wide receivers and everything. I mean, his wide receiver model is hot, caliente. I mean, Brett Whitefield has been just killing it. And gosh, so many more. Tom Brolley, his best bets, Familia. And you'll also get the ringside seat. If for some reason Bijan Robinson gets picked by the Philadelphia Eagles, you'll get a ringside seat to Joe Dolan jumping off his roof. So we'll see how that goes. But hey, Familia, we are, when it comes to people that I feel like can call a true friend since I've joined this industry. I mean, this is right here. This is one of them. One of the funniest people I know. Gosh, I mean, he's a Marine. Hoorah! Thank you for your service, mi amigo. When last year in Canton, I mean, I got to see so many people at the Fantasy Football Expo. I got to spend a couple hours just talking best ball with this guy, with my buen amigo, and I just love how his mind works, how he just looked at the macro level. We talked strategy. I mean, it was awesome. I learned so much. And right now you're going to learn a little bit more. So he writes for, Fantasy Six Pack, Stokastic.com. He's all over the place. And that's why I love having him when it comes to best ball. So I'm going to say bienvenidos and a big salute to mi amigo, Davis Peng. Peng's Picks. ¿Cómo estás?
Hey, Jorge, thanks for having me on. And the Canton thing cracks me up because I remember you kind of introduced me to a ton of people and kept me company. I know you're saying it the other way. No, I no one hang out with that for a good few hours. I was like, oh, thank God Jorge is here. Otherwise, I would be wandering around in a circle doing nothing. So, thanks for that. And I got to talk best ball, which was it's a win-win situation for me.
You gave me so much great best ball mania strategy on that at that time. I felt like I was soaking it in so much. I did a couple of drafts there at the end. I cashed a little money, but kind of broke even on the season. But this year, especially, now that I picked up the best ball, the Underdog sponsorship, I'm just so pumped to have that, and I keep doing some more. So keep looking out. You'll see some drafts. But yeah, you know what? That time in Canton, I mean, that was fun. Plus, you kept me from doing something stupid, which would have been like going down and playing in that football game, and I probably would have torn my Achilles or something like that and really hurt myself. So, but you know what? Before we get into it, I do want to give a shout out to the great one, Clayton Kershaw. Congratulations on 200 wins. Last night, it was vintage Clayton Kershaw. You were fantastic. 16 years with the LA Dodgers. I was there the day you signed your first contract. So proud of you. You've kept it clean. You've lived your life the right way. You got your championship. You got the 3 Cy Youngs. You got the MVP. 200 wins. Just another feather in the cap. I know you don't play for stats, but you know what? Congratulations on lasting that long, getting your name up there with Don Drysdale and Don Sutton. So proud of you. Congratulations. Keep going, keep winning, and keep sticking around so you can get 3,000 strikeouts. So congrats, Kirsch. So mi amigo, getting back to what's going on. You mentioned best ball season, and it's your time to shine. I kind of feel like best ball season. I mean, did it feel like this year best ball season kind of really started not long after the Super Bowl?
I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right? I know for a lot of the last year, a lot of the more degenerate people like myself and Eagles, known as James, and a few of my friends, we kind of started immediately. Like we started drafting, we started planning pretty fast. And we were like the few. Like I could honestly, we were the few. Like there's besides the main degenerates. Now, right now, though, if you've been following like how Underdog has been filling out their drafts, like big board filled out, super flex filled out, like in like 19 days, like the least favorite format, I at least from consensus that I could tell, filled out faster than any of the other formats did last year, at least for the most part, which is just telling me that everybody started drafting, everyone started prepping. Obviously the draft didn't begin until a little bit later, but people were already practicing, people were already trying, people were already like had their projections written up. And 19 days to fill up a contest. That's insane. That would never have occurred 3 to 4 years ago. Best Ball Mania 1 didn't even fill the first year. People forget that. I think that's 90%. So it never even filled. Now we got 2 contests, 2 big contests, a lot of mini contests all filling out. Like Underdog has just taken us to the next level, and they created a community. They gave us as fantasy sports writers, analysts, and etc. another avenue to just show that we know what we're doing, right? So everyone's kind of getting on the ball right now. Contests are difficult. People are getting better. So yeah, I think it started off, and you're going to see a ton of this. And this is still just the beginning. Like it wouldn't surprise me if next year they have a big board of 200,000 contestants or something, and that gets filled up before draft hits. Who knows at this point?
And you know what? Especially considering that people aren't knowing the landing spots. Like I'm in 2 drafts right now, and slow drafts, and I couldn't believe how like I'm looking, and it's like I'm clicking on Tyjae Spears, I'm clicking on Roshan Johnson, the rookies. I don't know where they're going to land, but I'm kind of like, well, maybe they'll do something in the second half of the season. Maybe they'll pick something up, and it's gonna be interesting to see how that comes. I love this format. I got into it much sooner. I think it was like late May before I started drafting last season, and to do one right now, I told myself I was going to hold off until I was done with my fantasy baseball drafts, and right after it's just like it clicked right away.
It's replacing mock drafts too. That's like another thing, right? Like a lot of us are drafting this to go, how are real redrafts going to go down? Now, a home league is always going to be much different than best ball. Like I'll tell you that straight right now. But you at least have a better identifier versus hopping into a Yahoo mock draft or ESPN mock draft, and everyone leaves group by round 6. Like right now, you have people putting in $3 to $5 and just running it in. The people taking, you can draft anytime with real value. And guess what? Like $3, UD has already proven that $3 to $5, and no one's going to care. Like they're willing to pay $5 just to test what's going on. And then you can bring it to work. I'm at work every day now, just like talking to one of my casual coworkers, like, hey man, guess where this guy's going right now? And he's like, dude, it's April. And I'm like, let me tell you where this guy's going. Did you know Justin Jefferson's 101? And he's like, what? Like, really? And I'm like, yeah, he's 101. Like, I just like, so maybe it's different. Like it's eventually creeping up on people. Like, I don't know. Like I said, that's just like a real life thing I do right now. I've been trolling him lately. I'm just like, hey, we taking Alan Lazard, and, we taking, Michael Thomas in round 10. And he's just like, Davis, it's April. Like, leave me alone. I'm like, no, we talk to you about this. So it gets exciting early. So if you're wondering what it's like to work with me, that's a little bit of a tidbit of a preview of what I am at work.
Well, you know what?
Mock drafts.
And it really is. It really is. I don't think I did. I actually felt like I learned a lot more. And there were certain players when I got to redraft season, I was just like, oh, I know that guy will be there. So it's like that guy will be there in the 6th round or the 7th round. Totally.
I mean, I was learning a lot of sleeper picks just because of these type of drafts, right? Like I was taking like Pacheco, McKinnon, and these guys that would have been undrafted in my home leagues. I had them all on my rosters. I had like Rashad White, all these guys, and everyone's like, who are these guys? And I'm like, you'll find out. Like you'll find out who these guys are. Like I'm like, and I was helping a bunch of people, and they were like, why do you have all these undrafted guys on your bench? I'm like, don't you worry, buddy. I got Pacheco, McKinnon, and Gainwell and Khalil Herbert with one anchor running back just going out there. And we almost won. We actually only lost because like we just didn't score well. But I ran an anchor running back team. Right? Javonte Williams is my starting RB, my only starting RB, and Dobbins. And we still made it to finals in our
Wow.
home leagues. It was just like because I had all these waiver knowledge, I had all this stuff like real value for people. People are spending money to draft, Rashad White. People are spending money to draft Isaiah Pacheco. Like, so it told me a little bit something else I need to know.
No,
Something
I
you don't
love
get
it.
from your home leagues.
You really don't. You really don't. And I think that's just that is a great reason to get into Underdog Familia. So I'm gonna match you up to $100. So get that. Use that promo code Familia 23. So don't forget. I won't be. This won't be the last time you'll hear about this. I'm gonna say a quick hello to a couple of people we got in the chat. Dame Overboard, ¿cómo estás?
Hey.
¿Cómo estás? Mr. Scampers. Hey, buenas tardes. Favorite cat. So Davis. Another reason to get to the expo, Mr. Scamper is going to be there. So
I'm still planning of how I'm going to get to this year. I'm a little tight on funds. It's not a no yet, but I am trying to figure that out. I had to budget really hard to get there last year. I have to figure out if I'm going to go and do this year or not. Or is it GoFundMe? Just kidding. GoFundMe, send Davis to Canton, Ohio.
Oh man, I'm going to say another quick shout out to Alberto Marroquin. Gracias for joining us. Thank you. Our regular crew, some of our regular crews in the house. So this is awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about the wide receiver going at the 101. I think that's going to be pretty much that is telling us that's how it's going to be during the regular season and during the regular draft season, the redraft season. How comfortable are you, with the 101 grabbing a wide receiver at that point?
So I was actually doing I did research on this actually not that long ago because I saw an article, I saw some posts that were like, this is the first year, we have had so many wide receivers in the first round. And I'm kind of I'm a little when it comes to proving a point. And I was like, no, that's not true, right? Like if you look at 2014, 2013, we had, Antonio Brown, Brandon Marshall, Calvin Johnson. I'm missing probably 2 other guys. We had 5 receivers in the first round. So this is not the first time we've had a ton of wide receivers in round 1. Now, this is probably the first time we've ever had a 101 wide receiver that's consensus. And I think a lot of it has to do is that we don't have the eye appeal running backs like we used to. Last year, we had a bunch of running back ones, right? We had Derrick Henry in round 1. We had Dalvin Cook in round 1, Austin Eckler. But Austin Eckler has some weird news going on right now. CMC is currently the only running back going around 1 off the top of my head. And it's kind of weird, but I think that just leans different because there isn't a Adrian Peterson. There isn't, more CMCs, another David Johnson going off, that kind of stuff. So I think that will be kind of normal, but I don't think that's just a death of the position. I think that's more of what we have in the league right now. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I think you're right. I think what, if things happen with Bijan Robinson like we think that they could happen, he could be the 101 next year.
Yeah.
And then quite honestly, one of the guys we're going to talk about very, very, very soon, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, he's one healthy season away from possibly going back into that, in the top, top 2 or 3 status. But you know what? The thing is, you talked about Antonio Brown. He was in that point. He had about a 2 or 3 year run where he was top 3, and a couple of times he was 101 overall in a lot of drafts. It's kind of like when I started playing fantasy football. Jerry Rice was in his prime, and he was clearly the 101. Yes, this was back in the newspaper days. keep stats on newspapers, so way back. And just another quick way back to buen amigo J Wall. ¿Cómo estás? Hopefully Texas is treating you better.
You mean J Moss? That was one of the sickest catches. I still talk about that catch every now and then. I'm like, dude,
that one, he landed on his back, man. Giannis landed on his back the other day, and he's, and now he's questionable for the rest of the playoffs. J Wall lands on his back, and he's just all of a sudden he's
out in the next game.
Set. He's right there. And Toronto Dave, muchas gracias for joining us. Muchas gracias. Hello in the Great White North, and yeah.
It's true.
Said your coworker.
It's true. I've been doing it to him for the last 2 years. I'll be like I've known him for a few years now, so we worked off and on with each other. And I remember I would show up for a whole week talking about hey man, Quincy and Newman, Jamison Crowder, and he was just like, dude, get out of here. It said so bad. He's like, stop it. I'm like, what? These are hypotheticals. So
Oh man,
been forever.
get it in there. I mean, heck, I ran into an old friend and at the Dodger game the other night, and hadn't seen him in a couple years. And immediately we're like, I asked him about his thoughts on the Cleveland Browns. He's a huge Browns fan, so we started talking about the Cleveland Browns right there and there. We just but yeah, the NFL scouts are gonna go to find Jay Wall at the draft next year because. Hey, you know what? We saw what the free agent market looked like for wide receivers this year.
Really
Jay Wall's going to get a job.
To get to your other point, that I think you were asking about like the rest of wide receivers and running backs. I do think we don't have any eye-popping talent right now that we had in 2014-15, right? Like, I don't really recognize a lot of the names I see now in the first, second round. I do. I know who Amon-Ra is. I know Garrett Wilson is and Chris Olave. But if we had guys like A.J. Brown, AJ Green, Brandon Marshall, Julio Jones, like in their prime, would these guys be second rounders, right? Would Chris Olave be a second rounder? Probably not, True. Right? So he's going in the second round. Garrett Wilson's in the second round. So I think our drafts, and people get more cemented. A lot of these older players get out. We'll probably have more running backs come up front. Maybe not in the 101, but Saquon should be a first rounder this year, right? And he's not. He's like a second round again, which is crazy to me.
That one's crazy. That one is crazy, especially coming off the good year. Everybody's back. They are going to add wide receivers, so maybe there's not going to be so many stacked boxes for him. So, you got to figure with, Brian Daboll as an expert play caller that that offense is going to take another step forward. I like Saquon where he's going to be. So, and plus he's playing for another contract at, playing on the franchise tag. So that's going to be good. But you know what? Let's jump into a little round by round strategy. And, I'd love your thoughts, kind of like where we're on a couple of players, kind of like values. Are they a good value? Are they maybe ranked a little high? Maybe comparison to some of the guys that are going there. I used a couple of things that pre-show. Graham Barfield put out his best ball rankings. This is going to be for single quarterback. Now, Familia, if you missed last week's show, I did a solo pod talking about the Superflex strategy. So I talked about that strategy. This week, we're going to talk about single QB, kind of like rankings, who's a value, who's not. So I'm looking at in the first round, we talked about the wide receivers going up at the front. I'm going to be a little controversial for some people. I'm going to put Jamar Chase there, just on the simple fact that, heck, it's Joe Burrow throwing to him instead of Kirk Cousins. So, but there are a couple of players I want to get your thoughts on. One is Jonathan Taylor, RB3 off of many boards. Going off at the 111. Now, this was the 101 last year, and apparently he's healthy. He did have ankle surgery to kind of clean up some things after that high ankle sprain. It was on January 25th. He'd never missed a game before last year. He's going into a contract year. Does 111 feel a little low for him?
So I'm not a JT guy.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a negative article on him the year he became RB1. So I'm probably not the best person to go off for this. Okay. So like a lot of the things I didn't like about JT had nothing to do with JT. It had everything to do with the Colts. And I was a year early on that, right? Like I just don't think the Colts were a good team. So right now in Underdog, JT's like RB5, right? And that's cool. Like RB2, RB5, like depending how you look at it, RB3, like he's bouncing up and down, given who you talk to. And is he a value? Possibly, because we've seen what happened with bad teams, what they did last year, right? We're talking about the Colts. Sorry, the Colts this year, but we're talking about the year prior. We're talking about, Falcons. We're talking about the Bears, talking about the Rams. They just chug that ball 22 times with their running back up the gut. Short passes up the gut. A lot of it's going to come down to who is their quarterback, how their coaching is overall. I don't really know much about this coaching staff too much, but it's nothing that I think is anything impressive. And do they fix their offensive line? Their offensive line is one of the worst offensive lines in the league, right? Like outside of Quentin Nelson, like this is a bad line. I think they were in the bottom of pass blocking and middle of the pack at run blocking.
Mm-hmm.
And you throw in a rookie there, like it's just you're asking for someone to get mauled. And I called this way in advance about Matt Ryan, and it wrote about like, hey, like why do we think this O line's good? Is it because you can name Quentin Nelson? Like he's a left guard. You know, he's probably a top 3 left guard, right? Like I don't mean to say he's not good, but he's not playing 5 roles. He's not the left tackle, the center, the right guard. He's one man, and you're asking a lot for him. So you're talking about a middle of the pack offensive line, wide receivers that don't scare me at all. Probably one of the worst receiving corps, even though they had 3 second-round picks in there last year with Paris Campbell, Alec Pierce, and Michael Pittman. Like, then they only got worse, right? So, is he a value if they get a veteran quarterback? If somehow like Russell Wilson ends on this team and can do 25 dump offs per game, like it's a value. But until that occurs, who knows? I think you get a lot of touches, but I just don't know if you get a lot of touchdowns or vice versa. Maybe you get a lot of touchdowns, but not a lot of rushing attempts. I'm just very curious. I'm just very curious how that team actually turns out because we've seen what happened to Damian Pierce, right? He runs 95 yards, 0 touchdowns, and it's like you get 9 points. Like it's not good. So,
you know, and to me, the one thing that worries me for him, I mean, I look at Shane Steichen. And he was on the staff with the Eagles, where in 2021, they were one of the most run-heavy offenses. And, if somehow Anthony Richardson ends up there, could it be he's that guy, kind of like where Jalen Hurts was in 2021, where he ran primarily and the running backs all had big, pretty good seasons. I think you're right about the offensive line. That's a question mark. I just, guys seem to perform when it comes to a contract year. And that to me is something that is very, that has me intrigued, especially considering the fact that running back is such a waste. It's
happened to Josh Jacobs last year, right?
Yeah.
He ran his best year on his contract year. He got the most usage. And I think that's very favorable to JT. So if you're talking about, hey, Davis, would you take him at the 112 and stuff? Yeah, I would take him. I would definitely have some exposure to him. He's not 101 anymore, which is great. His situation isn't great, but you don't have to be in a good situation to score points. We've seen like I said, Josh Jacobs had one of the worst situations last year, right? And he was around 5, round 6 guy, but he ended up being like RB2, RB3 in the season. So I think JT has a crazy range of outcomes. But do I think he's a value pick? Depends on how you're going to draft. If you're doing anchor running back, then that's fine. I just don't know if I want to stack him for like, I don't think I have to have him, is my point. I think you can get away with just any of the running backs at his range and kind of get the same results.
Yeah, I do. He's one of the guys that I would consider for an anchor running back. CMC being one, Eckler,
Saquon.
I think
Bijan.
Yeah, Bijan. But even still, I'm still gonna wait to see where Bijan gets picked next week. I worry he's gonna end up at the Chargers and end up in a committee with Eckler, and then
that'd be so rough.
That's going to torpedo his, all the people who are like, oh, he's the 101 in Superflex and Dynasty Superflex, that. But you know what? You being a Dolphins fan, I'm curious because I wanted to ask you. We put him on the on the thumbnail. Tyreek Hill, he's going off right now as the wide receiver 4 and number 6 overall. I mean, monster season. Tua's supposed to be back. Still, he had a monster season, even with Jalen Waddle. If you're picking right there in the middle of the first round, what's your comfort level there? Being a homer.
Being a homer is one thing. Being someone that's like just really likes Tyreek Hill. I love Tyreek Hill. I make fun of him for like other stuff, but I drafted a lot of. I had like 20% of the guy. This was a guy that was always wide receiver 1 with Alex Smith, with Matt Moore, with Patrick Mahomes and whatever. Like he can put up. The guy is like the fastest dude in the league. He can high point the ball even though he's only like 5'10", 5'11". He does. If you really watch his tape, he's probably one of the most complete wide receivers at his height. right? No one ever questioned if like Antonio Brown could high point a ball at his height, right? So why do we question Tyreek? So I had a lot of Tyreek last year. I think he's one of those guys that's just he's just good, as good as he can get at wide receiver. That isn't, you know, Justin Jefferson or something along those lines. So I think right now at value, he's a teardrop. I actually consider him the first teardrop at the first round. So right now, it's Justin Jefferson, Chase, CMC, and if you're feeling kind of crazy, maybe like Kelsey to Eckler, if Eckler is still a Charger. But like at that point, you get to Tyreek, it's a fall off. And then with the Eckler news being questionable, Tyreek is like that automatic 105. You know his quarterback situation. You know, Stafford right now is a toss up. So Cooper Kupp is still somewhat QB proof, but also kind of a toss up. But like Tyreek Hill, he's the consensus 105. So after him, now you're playing with everybody else that you can mix it up with. You can mix it up with Diggs, Adams, AJ Brown, JT, Saquon. You can get a random hodgepodge of first round picks. But at Tyreek at 105, 106, that's an automatic teardrop from there. And if you're not drafting him, and you're taking some of these other guys to mix up your exposures, like do you think Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb are comparable, even though they're 5 picks away?
No,
probably not.
no,
Right?
not at all.
Close. So
no, because Tyreek Hill was on track for he was gonna threaten Cooper Kupp's, Cooper Kupp and Calvin Johnson. He had a possibility of 2,000 yards last year. So
yeah,
he
did this with 4 quarterbacks, something along the lines of that. The dude's overutilized. I think once they kind of figure it out, first time in the scheme, that guy was averaging like 10 targets a game. It's amazing. He had a crazy season, and people took that Patrick Mahomes narrative too far and just kind of forgot that he played with Matt Moore and Alex Smith. So I'm all for Tyreek Hill. I think he's not necessarily a value, but he's at a fair price. Like he's a teardrop. After that, I don't feel better with Stephon Diggs. I don't feel better with Devontae Adams, AJ Brown. I don't feel better with CeeDee Lamb. I like all those guys. I just don't think they're on the same level as Tyreek Hill.
I think Devontae Adams could sneak back in there, but it's a big question mark. Does Jimmy G stay healthy? And do they draft a rookie quarterback if Jimmy G doesn't stay healthy? And plus it's so fun to have Tyreek Hill. It's so fun when he breaks off those 80-yarders. This was a great offense when it was really humming. So, and one of the things I'm going to keep an eye on is when their schedule comes out. I want to look at how often the Dolphins are home in December, when because they had to go. I think they had to go back-to-back weekends to Buffalo and New England last year, and that was just you don't want to see that. Like, I'll give you an example. A few weeks back, I went down a rabbit hole with Dan Marino in his epic 1984 season. From November 1st to the end of the season, he did not play in any places that had bad weather. They had a bunch of home games, a game in San Diego, and I think they had a dome game in there. So he didn't go to Buffalo, he didn't go to New England, he didn't go to New York. Everybody came to Miami. So it was fascinating. So that's why I want to, those teams in good weather that could go and end up going to bad weather like the Dolphins. I want to keep an eye on them. So
that's a fair point. Weather is something we don't look at a lot, and we should, because it is a changer, right? Like, we know as playing fantasy for the last decades, it's like people don't pass in the snow. Like, no one really throws in the snow. And if you need a proof of that, like, just remember the Patriots just did 2 pass attempts against the Bills once, right? That kind of situation. Like I said, I think Tyreek goes in very particularly just a teardrop at talent. I think people kind of got too far of it. Like I said, too much of the hate, and he proved everyone wrong. Like, they thought he was going to be some locker room headache or what. I'm like, no, this dude's a competitor. Maybe we might not like him personally, but like, he is good. He is so good.
That's so good. And Dame Overboard, how about when he grabbed that fumble from a scrum and then ran around everybody to score a TD? Yeah.
He's a game changer, man.
How about the time he caught a touchdown and didn't realize it? When he fell back on his back. Somehow he ended up with the ball, and they ruled it an incomplete. and then it was in the replay. He didn't even realize it. They ruled it incomplete. He didn't say anything. They looked at the replay, and Andy Reid's going to him, "Why didn't you? Why didn't
Yeah,
you know that you caught that?" It's like, I didn't know.
yeah, nobody
I'm that
knows.
good.
And here's the thing about, like, I'll say about Tyreek. The man had like 7 touchdowns last year. He threatens for touchdowns every year. He was averaging 100 yards like per game. Like his average yards at the end of the season is 100, over 100 yards per game. So
Yeah.
you're getting good value with him. And we know one thing right now is that Mike McDaniels likes to showcase Tua. He wants to showcase Tua. He wants people to forget, he wants to change, make that guy's confidence go. They threw that ball a ton. Tua was passing the ball 30, 40 times, and Tyreek Hill was getting 10, 13, 15 targets per game. I don't like the running backs that much either. Like, I'm not so stoked on Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. So, and I think most people are in the same boat with me there. So if you don't believe in the running backs, then it makes you just want to take the receivers more.
100%, amigo. That one, there's some talk of them getting running backs in that 2, 3, 4 range, because they don't have that many draft picks. I think they only have 4 draft picks next week. So could they get a running back with one of those? Possible, and that could be somebody who could become maybe this year's Dameon Pierce, this year's Isaiah Pacheco, that guy that really performs. So, you mentioned a little bit about whether or not passing. So that takes me to the round 2. You got the quarterbacks, in ADP are going in this range. You got Mahomes going at number 14 overall, Josh Allen, number 16 overall, Jalen Hurts at number 17 overall. One of my brands, one of my, stances for this season is going to be the fact that I'm recommending the elite QB strategy. So I'm saying no, to go quarterback at this early in best ball. How do you feel about that possibility?
So I see the value for this. I'm not the biggest fan of taking these guys. I feel like you're committing a lot, and when you do take them, in my mind, you're not playing the format. So when you're taking this person like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, you're playing the format in the sense of this guy's gonna crush every week. And I think Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts have the very potential to crush every week. So when I looked at Patrick Mahomes last season, I think he had like 4 to 5 games under 18 points or less. The rest of the season was like 22 or more, some ridiculous number, like 20 or higher, up to 32 points. And to put in perspective, like 32 points is like the equivalent of like 5 touchdowns, and think like 180, like 7 touchdowns, something ridiculous that you have to get that kind of points. So he's throwing 300, 400 yards and 4 to 5 touchdowns. And I think for Mahomes, it's capable that he can do that every game. I don't think anyone's ever going to project Mahomes under 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, anyone who does is crazy, right? Like, that's not the case. So when you buy them, you're believing that they will go off every week. But who are you giving up at that price, right? Like, so if you believe they're just that much better than the rest of the second round guys, like if you think they're better than Saquon, if you think they're better than, Jalen Waddle's replacement points, they're better than Nick Chubb and T. Higgins, Jacobs, then sure, I think you can do that. But skill positions are so much harder to find than quarterback. I would much rather grab someone like Joe Burrow, right? I would rather grab Joe Burrow 2 or 3 rounds later. I'd rather put together some weird team of like Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, because Kirk Cousins still finished like QB 10, 11. He was amazing up until week 17, which obviously is the week that matters. But like, no one predicted that was going to be the case. I mean, to get shut out.
I did actually.
Week 17, you just had him just being completely bad. I mean, it was against Green Bay, so like it makes sense.
In Green Bay,
but
in Green Bay, dome teams.
But they also dominated Green Bay like in like week 2, I believe. So like, but you're talking about from drafting from in preseason to week 17, like it's a toss up, right? I do think there is value in taking someone like Mahomes, but if Mahomes doesn't get you 32 points and you lost out on a second round guy, it's going to be hard to replace that. And think about it like this. So if you're going for this year versus last year, Mahomes was also a second, third round guy last year. Tyreek Hill was at the end of the second round. What's worth more value to you, Tyreek Hill or Patrick Mahomes?
That's true. Though, another guy who was going in that second round last year was Deebo Samuel. So,
Sure.
if you go, it's almost like a 50-50 proposition because yes, Tyreek Hill's going in there. I think AJ Brown was going
AJ Brown was a second round guy. Nick Chubb
yeah,
was a second, third round guy.
yeah,
Saquon Barkley was a second, third round guy. Now, those are last year's values versus this year, so it's a little bit different. But you still got Nick Chubb going
yeah,
10 picks later. You got Devontae Smith going 10. You got T. Higgins. You got a lot of guys going way later than
yeah.
Mahomes. And like I said, if you just want to go that route and go that way, it's totally fine. But I think you can find other values that can equal when you combine them together. Like I said, Joe Burrow goes 16 picks later. I would rather take my shot on Joe Burrow at pick, overall 30, or maybe take Justin Fields or Lamar, Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott. Like these guys can put up 28-point games, maybe not consistently, but part of the format is having 2 to 3 guys that can give you odds of 28 points.
Plus,
that's why I'm not taking a ton of Mahomes.
The thing you mentioned about Burrow, because Burrow could have a Patrick Mahomes like season. He could have a 5,000 yard, 35 touchdown season. Very, very possible. And that's totally within the range of outcomes. Yes, you're getting there. And you can possibly stack T. Higgins and Joe Burrow and do that. That's why part of my elite quarterback strategy is it's not just those 3 guys to talk about. I think other guys that could be in the conversation for that elite quarterback to take step forwards. Burrow was one of the main guys. Lamar Jackson, another guy, and Justin Herbert with Kellen Moore calling the plays. I think all those are very, and Justin Fields with the rushing possibilities. So that the top 3 quarterbacks could have 4 other contenders that are fighting it out with them. So that's why that's part of the elite QB strategy.
I mean, even if you look at someone like Daniel Jones, right? Like Daniel Jones had that 36-point game on the week 17.
Yes.
Week 16, I think he did 22 points. And then I think the week prior he did nothing, but the other week he did 20. So like I said, when you're playing the format, you're just saying, I got 3 guys that have a shot or a possible, 1 in 3 shot to get you 24 points. But I can't get round 9 receivers and say you have a shot at being Jalen Waddle. Like I'm not gonna grab, like George Pickens or not even like say further down. Would I grab who's like a later guy that I think like Josh Palmer and go, you can be Jalen Waddle? And the odds are very slim for that, right? So I think that's why I'm not so in on it. But I do think you can build a team that matches that. Someone has to take Mahomes eventually. Someone has to take Hurts, and there is value in like consistency, high upside consistency. So they're not just consistent players. They're like the upper elites. So I do think you can do it. I personally am just going to keep my exposures flat when it comes to those guys.
One last thing on those guys, the other thing to consider with them is the fact that maybe you don't have to take the, pile up quarterbacks on that one. I mean, I think I'm always going to recommend taking 3, but maybe you can wait on somebody and take another wide receiver because you're like, okay, I got Patrick Mahomes. So that, these guys can carry things. So that's the last thing there. We're round 3. One guy that I think is really interesting. I think there's a lot of injury optimism that I really am worried about is Breece Hall at RB11. He's number 28. He's going number 28 off of boards. And he's going ahead of Tony Pollard, DK Metcalf, Chris Olave, Justin Fields, and Ramondre Stevenson. And, this is a guy who got hurt in week 7. And, a lot of times it's that full year before they're back. I know sometimes guys come back in at 9 months, but, I kind of don't, where do you go on drafting guys that are coming off of serious injuries like a torn ACL with Breece Hall?
So I think this one's always tough because everybody's a little bit different. I will say one thing that Breece has going from is that the news hasn't been bad. Like everything has been positive up until this point. One of the articles I wrote last year was about just guys I don't want, right? Like it was overrated players as a whole. And actually the article hit like almost 100% dead on, which was actually weird because that's pretty good to get 100% right article. In one of them, I just listed like 10 guys that came off injury. And to be fair, I ended up being right. Like even with Chris Godwin was not a good fantasy value last year. And I think Brees is a little bit different than those guys because he is a little bit younger. His news is a lot better. So I would say follow the news. If it's news like Dobbins, if it's news like Thomas, news like Jameson Williams, Godwin, there was a lot of guys last year who came with ACL tears. There was a whole flock of them. And I remember all of them just being so negative, like, oh, he might not start week 1. He's barely practicing. He's starting to do cuts now. And I'm like, this is August. Like, this is not what I want to hear in August. I need to hear this in April, in May. So I would say follow up on those during that time. If you want to take a shot at Brees and you think he can come back, have at it. Week 7 is bad, but it's not as bad as what Javonte Williams is going through right now. Like Javonte Williams' news is the complete opposite, right? And I think he got injured way earlier. So we can tell when something is polarizing of it's not looking good, you know. And Dobbins came back. I mean, Akers, same reason too. Like he came back and started off slow, but him and Dobbins had an amazing finish last year. So people can come off injuries and take off. And if Brees Hall sucks for the first 4 weeks and then figures it out and gets better by, you know, week 5 and plus, then you just have yourself a stud at week 3, 4. Like that's fine. Like round 4, round 3, that's not that bad because the points that matter are the ones later. You have 5, 6 other running backs, 4 other running backs that are going to cover Brees Hall. So I think there is a value in taking them. I might take him right now. I have a little bit. I don't have a ton. I do think there's a lot of better running backs way later because I think the market's not correct on running backs this year, like it was last year, right? There's gonna be a lot of guys that are gonna put up good numbers at round 7, round 8. But if things shift upwards and people are starting to take running backs a little bit more, I think Brees could be a solid value. We saw what he did last year. He was a weapon on his own. Like he was winning games.
Fantastic. He would have been the 101. I think he would have been the 101 had he played the whole season healthy.
Yeah, if he finishes the whole season, was doing what he was doing, averaging 100 yards, catching a buttload of passes, he'd be top 3 pick this year. And there'd be no talks about it, right? He'd probably be JJ than him. And so at round 3, going to round 4, like I have nothing against it. You know, take your pop shots. We're in April and he's having good news, right? This would be, like I said, Javonte Williams sounds like terrible news right now. So
I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos drafted a running back. The one thing on Brees that has me pumping the brakes though, and one guy that is a pick 8 picks later is Najee Harris,
that's my guy.
I'm high on him for this year because
I'm taking so much Najee, it's bad.
It's like Mike Tomlin. What does Mike Tomlin do? He rides the bell cow. And Najee was good after he got healthy, and so I think he's gonna pop this year. So I'll take my chances with the guy who's going to be healthy from day 1, rather than the guy that I'm hoping is healthy on the back half of the season because I don't want to cost myself at the beginning of the season. So
my thing with Najee, and this is what I actually wrote an article on this one early this year, coming into this season for Best Ball. And I was telling people were like, oh, Jalen Warren looked so much better than him, or Jalen Warren had a better rushing grade. Or none of those things are true, by the way. Like,
yeah,
it wasn't. If you actually look at PFF, the rushing grade's almost identical. The receiving grade does favor Jalen. It does. But pass blocking favors Najee. Red zone usage favors Najee like 9-1. You're talking about overall touches. Not one game did Warren out-touch Najee, and it's not even remotely close. Warren's most touches, I think, was like 14 to 15 touches, and I think Najee had like 25 that game. You know, and it was in a game that they were just dominating against the Ravens. So and he's going at 4th, 5th round right now. Like, I'm gonna snatch him up, even if his workload drops from 300 to 250 touches for your 5th round running back. Come on, like, there's no burst to Najee. I agree, but we already talked about this. 90 yards and no touchdown is 9 points.
Exactly.
So it's the touchdowns that matter. It's the high value touches, the touchdowns, the targets. And if he gets anything remotely close to what he did last year, you're getting him in the 5th round. It's not like you're paying a 2nd round, 1st round price on him. I was out on Najee last year. I said people were going to put him up at 101, 105. I said I wanted nothing to do with them. All the injury news came out. He went to the end of the 1st, early 2nd. I was just like, grab Nick Chubb. Go grab Nick Chubb in the 3rd. I was drafting Saquon from round 3 to round 1. I just took him all year. Saquon's news was great last year. You know, total opposite of the year before. So I'm with you. I'm taking Najee all the way to the bank.
Especially considering, like, I was just looking at the ADP, the combo of 4 sites. After Najee, it's a big break to 12 picks until Dalvin Cook, and so that feels like it's a big tier break at that point, and you're getting big value.
People are going to figure this out, and when they do, a lot of drafts are going to have passed by already, and it's just funny to me. Like, Najee is just such a steal right now, and one thing I will say is you may draft him as your RB2, but your RB2 and your flex are the exact same position in best ball. They're the exact same position. So, you grab 3 receivers, a running back, or 3 receivers, or 2 receivers, quarterback, wide receiver like Najee. You're always looking pretty. You're always sitting pretty there. So that's how I feel about it. I think that if he goes into your flex, that's fine. He's a 5th round guy. Who cares?
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go to the next round. This has been awesome. So round 4, it's kind of like, let's say you didn't pick Kelsey in the first round. And a lot of people are picking him 4th overall. Round 4, you got the next tight ends. You got Mark Andrews going off at number 37 ADP, and TJ Hawkinson number 42. Now, these are the guys you're passing if you go either one of those that are going in this range. You got Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Calvin Ridley. So I know the positional value of the tight end, but man, I mean, these players are going to outscore these tight ends, and it has me wondering if waiting might be a better strategy. What, the elite tight end at this point, where the next tier of elite tight ends, where do you kind of stand on passing up on some of those value players for to go with a really good tight end?
So there's the thing with tight ends always been tough. And I was talking about this last year about Mark Andrews when he was going to the 2nd. Everyone's like, Mark Andrews is the guy. I hate being like that negative Nancy, but I was just like, you do remember he went round 6, 7 the year prior, because he went round 2, round 3 the year prior to that, and then didn't make up for it.
Yep.
So Mark Andrews has had a good year, a bad year, a good year, a bad year, and a good year now, right? Like, that's exactly how he's gone now. Or he's like good, bad, and now he's in this bad year, so he dropped 2 rounds, right? And Hawkinson was the opposite. He was bad, good, bad turned good, because he went to the Vikings. But he was at round 7, so it made sense. Like, you took him round 7, you're not giving up a lot. When you're drafting these guys here, you want to dominate your tight end position. That's what you're saying. I want to dominate in this position. Is there value there? Yeah, of course. Tight ends are the most pain in the butt position to take, right? You could take 3 tight ends and you might get 6 points that week. You might, who knows? Like, you're hoping for a touchdown in like 40 yards. You'll be lucky if you get 40 yards, or your contributor might be a guy that catches 1 pass for a touchdown. We've seen that, like Mo Alley Cox is the king of like 1 yard touchdowns at like goal line fades, right? And he contributes. Like, so 6 points in your tight end position always feels bad. But I do think there's a bit of an overvalue for someone like Andrews. I think Hawkinson could be really good depending on how this draft shapes up. Kirk Cousins obviously liked using him. The guy was getting like 8 to 10 targets a game, just going off. Had a great playoff advancement rate. I think he went back to back weeks just being amazing. But when I ask myself by Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson and then I look at the next tight end, is he that much better than Evan Ingram? Is he that much better than Dallas Goedert?
Yeah.
And I don't think so. Like, I look at Dallas Goedert, and I like Dallas Goedert's value last year. I love his value now. Dallas Goedert is going like 30 picks later, 40 picks later than Andrews, and about 40-something picks later than Hawkinson. Like, Goedert had is an obvious use on this team, right? Goedert was good all season long, and short of his injury, then he came back and became good again. Like, I would just take Goedert. I would take Goedert. I would take a shot on Waller. Waller's been a toss up to Evan Ingram. Like, all these guys have the same range of outcomes as at least TJ Hawkins to Andrews on their upside weeks. I do think that Andrews and Hawkinson will outperform, but they're still tight ends. Like, it's either Kelsey or bust at that point, and I'm just going to kick that can and take Goedert. I'll take Freiermuth. I'll take Njoku, who had a great year. And once again, I'm here to play best ball, which means I'll take 3 tight ends and hope that one of those 3 guys goes off. And you just got to take 3.
100%. That to me, yeah, go elite or just leave them
Go
alone.
home. That's it. Like, I think you're playing with Andrews and Hawkinson. Like, you're kind of playing with fire because we've seen this. We've had buyer's remorse on both those guys every other year.
Plus, another guy who goes 11 picks after TJ Hawkinson is George Kittle, who is like best ball king, and he helped so many people during those those weeks 14 to 17 where he was. I think he scored.
I'm
like
not the
6
biggest
touchdowns.
Kittle guy, but if you believe Purdy starts, you take Kittle, right?
Yeah.
Like, so to put it in this way, like weeks 1 through weeks 5, Kittle had total of 7 points, like a total of like 7 points. And then after that, he kind of went up and down, up and down. It is a tight end role, and it's a good tight end. Kittle is one of those guys I say is too good of a player because he's so good that they make him run block, they make him pass block, they make him do all these things when they could just feed him the ball, right? Like feed the ball to Kittle. Like we know he can be a tight end 1 if he got nearly as many targets as Kelsey, nearly as many targets as Andrews and Hawkinson. We know he's probably one of the best tight ends. A little injury prone, sure, but you're right though. I would rather take Kittle than take Andrews or Hawkinson because it is in pick 50. I can grab my stud elite wide receivers, my stud running backs, my stud quarterback. Then, so grab Kittle, grab Goddard. Be done at tight end.
100%. Me encanta. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at round 5 right now. This is interesting because you got DeAndre Swift going off at number 57, Joe Mixon going off at number 58. I don't love either of these guys. And you've got, wide receivers going in this range of Godwin, Judy, and Christian Watson. I'm kind of like, well, I mean, the news is mixed on Mixon, no pun intended, but
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
I just look like DeAndre Swift can't stay healthy. Mixon may not be a Bengal, so I'm like, I actually like Godwin a lot this year, even though he's got a quarterback downgrade to Baker Mayfield, but I think Godwin could make some good music now that he'll have a healthy offseason going off. I mean, and Christian Watson's going to get fed pretty well too, though he gets a quarterback downgrade. How do you kind of where do you stand on these running backs at this point?
So I think this round's weird. So I do know that I have a good feeling that DeAndre Swift is just going to plummet. He's pick 68 right now in Underdog, and he's probably going to go further down. We saw this in Big Board Superflex. The David Montgomery news just hurt him.
Yeah.
Joe Mixon with his menacing Mixon, I like to call him. He's going further down. Like Chris Godwin, Judy, I like. I'm not a big Judy guy, but I will admit that he's in a very supplanted like Cortland Sutton, right? So that's perfect for him. I think Chris Godwin, he's just good. Good players will do well even with bad quarterbacks, right? We've seen this year after year. Brandon Marshall has been good with 15 quarterbacks. DeAndre Hopkins has been good with 15 quarterbacks. AJ Brown has gone Antonio Brown has been gone to 15 different teams, at this point, and he's done dominating all of them. Some guys are just QB proof. I think Chris Godwin's going to get to that point. I think Mike Evans also falls in this category. I think they're fine values. The one scares me besides Mixon is DeAndre Swift. That man has never finished a season. I'm not questioning his talent, but I am questioning how his team feels about him. They pay David Montgomery, a guy that can go up the middle, a guy that can break tackles, can take hits, can pass catch too, and pass block. He's probably going to get all the red goal lines. I think you'll get some good weeks out of DeAndre Swift, but at his current ADP, it's just not worth it. Like you're going to be afraid every week having him. You're going to be afraid to have Swift. And maybe it's just me, but when he came back from his injury, he doesn't look like a guy that's been seeking contact since.
Yeah.
I look like he was really not trying to truck a player step. He was attempting more elusiveness than he was before his injuries. And when you're like, we talked about this, running backs don't have a long career, So if he's feeling that, like I said, the last 4 or 5 games, I just was not excited to watch DeAndre Swift. He just wasn't that good in my mind. I think his athleticism is still there to an extent, but mentally, if you're mentally afraid that you can't put pressure on your legs, you can't take a hit in the position that requires you to take a hit the most, I can't buy you. So I think Swift for me is completely off my board. I have drafted very minimal to no Swift. I maybe in some big board super flexes I have, but in regular big board, I just haven't touched him because the ADP was not there for him. At 57, give me Chris Godwin, give me Jerry Judy, give me Christian Watson, give me the guys after him. I'll take almost anybody before and after of Swift. Then I would Swift at his current ADP.
Oh man! All right, man. Maybe we're going to pick up the pace on this one. It's kind of a little bit. So we're getting back half of the first 10 rounds. Jameson Williams going off at number 66. Does he feel like kind of like that boom? That occasional boom week guy.
The new Will Fuller, man. That's what he is.
Oh yeah, I love that. I mean, hopefully he's more healthy. Coming off of that the ACL injury. Yeah, he's going off at number 66. Now you got the rookie wide receiver run that starts with Jackson Smith and Jigba 6 picks later. But Williams going at this point, he's like, it's round 6. He's maybe your 3rd wide receiver, maybe your 4th wide receiver at this point. I'm getting kind of excited about grabbing him at that point.
No, it's fair. So Williams on UD is going really high because people on UD just tend to just want their boom guys. We're playing to win week 17, right? I was very off Williams last year. Props to me on that one, right? And props to everybody that was off of him because we all knew that it was a severe injury. But he came in, he showed some explosion. Could he get better by next year? I think he can. I don't trust Goff a ton. I think Goff kind of scares me as a deep thrower. I don't think he's one of the best deep ball throwers in my mind. So that's the only thing that does scare me. Amon Ross separates a little too well. I think that if you're a veteran like Jared Goff, you're going to take the easy moves, and I think that's where Jameson Williams will take a hit. But like you said, if he's your wide receiver 4, it doesn't get better than that because if he catches 4 passes, I guarantee he's 4 passes for 100 yards total and a touchdown probably. So I think Williams has a very strong place once you're cemented enough, right? You're buying him to be your star wide receiver 3. You're buying him to be your star flex. And I think that's fine. I think at that price, that's good. But I am looking at JSN too. I think JSN being the best wide receiver in this class right now, you have to buy that. You have to buy the news on that kind of stuff.
Oh man! Shout out Marvin Jones Jr. Thank you, Mr. Scampers, for adding the comedy. And Mike LaPlante, thank you, muchas gracias on the great info comment.
But no, Marvin Jones Jr. actually is a good point. I mean, I know that Mr. Scampers is kind of messing with us, but he's right. Marvin Jones Jr. is a great red zone target. That guy's a great 50-50 ball guy. He's a veteran. He knows how to play zone. He stole touchdowns from the last every year he's been in the league. That guy has stole tons of touchdowns. So I think that is another thing to be thankful about.
You are not kidding. So round 7 is interesting because we got back-to-back players in ADP. Marquise Brown from Montreal Expo. Marquise Brown's going off at number 77, and Deontay Johnson's going off at number 78. And I look at this one. Brown is going to have a backup quarterback for a good chunk of the season, and then you've got Johnson. Yes, he's got some competition, but this is a guy who was close to 10 targets a game last year. And I don't see his targets going, diminishing this year. I almost feel like Pickens will get some more, and I know Allen Robinson just joined the group, but this one seems like it should be flipped, and I'm kind of like I want Deontay Johnson all day in this round.
I think this is probably my least 2 favorite guys to draft. Like they're my least favorite, but my favorite at the same time. It's weird. Like these guys have a great starter role, but not great situations, right? Like Kenny Pickett, I think he will take a step forward. Deontay Johnson had no touchdowns, 1 touchdown last year, basically nothing. Zero. So he throws in 6 touchdowns. That's another 36 points. He looks a lot better on paper. And Deontay Johnson can get 6 touchdowns. Let's be real. Anybody can get 6 touchdowns. I want the targets. I want those guys that are the one on their team. And I think Brown and Deontay, they do 2 different things. One guy is more of a speedster. One guy is the opposite end, more surgical. I think you can buy either guy and get the same results. Because at the end of the day, I don't see either of these guys being 2 touchdown players. I feel like Marquise Brown will forfeit his touchdowns to a tight end. Will forfeit his touchdowns to James Conner. Will forfeit his touchdowns to not being able to get down the field because it's Colt McCoy thrown at him. But like There's a lot of things, and if DeAndre Hopkins is somehow still on this team, then he just forfeits it to DeAndre Hopkins, right? Like, so I think they're just in walk hard situations. And then Deontay Johnson will forfeit his touchdowns to Pat Fryermuth. He'll forfeit touchdowns to Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, George Pickens. I mean, they're pegged to be 1,000-yard guide, 6 touchdowns kind of guys to me at best. I don't think me and you can see any of these guys get 10.
No, I don't think so. I think Deontay does get 5 or 6 TDs, but I think he's going to be very much 1,000 yards.
Yeah,
and he's going to have like 80 to 90 receptions.
So when it comes to pure stats, they're probably the same guy. I think the only difference is you get a couple more receptions with Deontay Johnson, give or take whatever happens to DeAndre Hopkins. That's really about it, right? So I don't think they're just basically the same player to me when it comes to just analytics for fantasy points.
For fantasy points.
For fantasy points, not in real life.
And you know what? And Brown might have more spike weeks. That's the thing, because he's a speedster, and assuming that DeAndre Hopkins gets traded, that could open up the possibilities that he could have more, a couple of 150-yard, 1 touchdown and 1 or 2 touchdown games. But oh my goodness. we're getting some comedy in you guys misunderstand Mr. Scampers. He is always 100% serious. Yes. Yeah. and yes, speaking of serious, David Blau, you're killing me. We don't know who could get 6 TDs. Oh man.
I do think Marquise Brown, though, if DeAndre Hopkins leaves, then yeah, you just take him. You just take him, go off it, and I think that's totally fine. But based on what I'm seeing right now, like, who knows? Does DeAndre Hopkins get traded? Who knows? We'll find out.
So we'll go to round 8. We'll zoom through these last 3. Jahan Dotson at number 88 or Kadarius Toney at 89. Very different QB situations for them. Sam Howell potentially for the Commanders, and of course Mahomes for Kadarius Toney.
So on the list, I know it's Jahan Dotson, Toney, Gabe, or Sutton. I don't like Toney, man. I just don't. I think guys that are headaches. I think guys that have not shown they could be on the field. I was talking to my co-host yesterday for Road to 150. We were talking about like how good was Toney last year, and she was like, "Oh, he must have been fine." He had 0 usable games last year. He had 0 usable best ball games last year. John Dotson had like a bunch because he's a red zone threat. If Howell's playing, I like it. I like Dotson. He's better than Curtis Samuel. He's bigger. He's better than the tight end they have there, Logan Thomas or whoever is left over there. So it's just Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, and Jahan Dotson's the bigger man. So who gets the red zone? Probably the running back or Dotson. And then give me Gabe Davis. I would take Gabe Davis over Toney. The value at pick 89, 90, something, whatever. That's so much better. Josh Allen likes to air the ball out, and Gabe Davis came off an injury, and he still was getting targets. We saw a lot of what ifs. I just don't know what Toney's right now. Toney just scares me. I don't know if he's ever going to play the entire season. Because he hasn't. And he's the hardest player to project. I don't think anyone has accurate projections on Kadarius Toney.
No, I think they're going to be all over the place. I think there's going to be some excitement about him that maybe overblow his ADP. There'll be something that Patrick Mahomes says nice about him, and then all of a sudden it's going to jump him up. I'm still a Sky Moore guy, so I'm going to.
Patrick Mahomes asked for Zay Flowers to go to the Chiefs today. Like, how you know what I mean? Like, how happy are you for Kadarius Toney?
Oh my God,
the guy that handled a punt return in the Super Bowl, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, it's his role is the most inconsistent. Therefore, I have no idea how to project him. Therefore, I don't want him.
Oh man! All right, looking at round 9.
My boy.
Which one? Michael Thomas in 98?
Michael Thomas, baby. It's not even for Michael Thomas.
It's like at that point, Quentin Johnston or Rashad Bateman at 102. I'm like, yeah, how can please. I'm going to give you the floor on this one.
So Quentin Johnston, I'm not into the athletic type guys that need polishing. I think there is the value for them. If he gets drafted in the first 2 rounds, Quentin Johnston is a guy I'm in for. But Michael Thomas, and this is the one thing I will say about Michael Thomas. I didn't draft him last year. Drafted him a bunch a year before. He failed fantasy both years. But when he did play last year, which was the first 3 games, that guy caught 16 out of 22 targets. And 2 of those games had a touchdown in them, and he went 5 for 5 in the game he didn't catch a touchdown. Like, the man is obviously good at football. They get Derek Carr, which is an obvious upgrade at quarterback. Say what you will about Jameis Winston or whoever they had last year, but Derek Carr is an obvious upgrade. The best quarterback they had since Drew Brees, right? Teddy Bridgewater got Michael Thomas to work. Taysom Hill got Michael Thomas to work. Michael Thomas is so many years removed from his injuries, and they paid him. The Saints said, we're going to give you a ton of money still. If that doesn't inspire confidence to anybody, then what will at this point? Like, Odell Beckham got a bunch of money, right? So, like, and I think they paid Michael Thomas a little bit less than Odell or something. Like, whatever the case is, like, I think Michael Thomas is a guy that is going to surprise people if he plays. And I get it if he plays. But the 3 games he played last year, he was fantasy relevant. I'm sure in week 1, week 2, all of us were like, should I trade for Michael Thomas? Because he's going to go off. He's going off right now. So I'm signed up for him. He's the best receiver at round 9, round 10. There's no doubt about it.
And you know what? I want to add one thing to them. You're talking about that. You know who he beat up on in week 1?
Who?
AJ Terrell. Mossed him twice. Mossed him twice in the uncontested catch balls. And he, and AJ Terrell was fantastic last year. I think, and
he had a slump year, but he was still pretty good.
Yeah. He finished strong. Yeah.
Michael Thomas is turning 30, so he's not old for a receiver. He's a possessional guy. He's just good at the game. His personality, not great. But none of that matters when he's on the field.
Yeah.
He's going to play with Chris Olave. Derek Carr's going to throw the ball. We don't know what's going on with Alvin Kamara. We don't trust their tight end. We don't know who the wide receiver 3 is. Nothing on this team outside of Olave and Thomas is great. And before anyone says, well, like, do you like it? I mean, look what Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf did with Geno Smith last year. No one liked them last year besides me and like another handful of guys. Michael Thomas is like at pick 100. What do you have to lose at this point?
He's like your 4th receiver, 4th or 5th receiver at this point. Yeah.
Consensus wide receiver 1 years ago. And it's not like he lost a step. He's still dominating. Like you said, he just beat AJ Terrell when he came back while still injured. So the Saints must have enough confidence to sign this guy that just took the bag from them. That tells me a lot. So sign me up for some Michael Thomas. The Saints are trying to win their division. They see a weakness in their division right now. They paid Michael Thomas. I'm taking him. There's nobody else I would want at this point.
Love it. Yes. We're so in tandem on this one. Najee Harris and Michael Thomas. Who'd have thought? You'd have thought
I love the players that people love to hate. I take them. I do. I'm very like contrarian, I guess, but it pays out.
And then you get the dart throws later that could pop at that point. You get Jerick McKinnon, this year's Jerick McKinnon or something like that. So, round 10, we're going to close it out. You want to talk about quarterbacks or rookies?
We can talk about quarterbacks. And this is where I kind of get weird with it. I'm not the biggest fan of Geno Smith. I do think he has a shot at being relevant, but the guy that I'm liking at, and this is where I'm going to show my biasness, is Derek Carr. Derek Carr was overly drafted last year. He got drafted as like QB 10 to 12. And yeah, I get it. Davante Adams was a good reason to take a guy like him. But it wasn't great. But here's the one thing I'll say about Derek Carr. He actually didn't have a down year last year. If you look at his actual fantasy points from last year to the year before, they were the same exact numbers nearly. I just think that he just had a bad coach. Josh McDaniels is just not a good coach. He just did not want to use Derek. I think Derek's going to get a lot more free reign. They paid the guy a ton of money. They must have liked what they saw. He gets Chris Olave plus Michael Thomas. He doesn't have injured Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow that runs into Devontae Adams. You know what I mean? He doesn't have like these Mac Hollins. Like he's going to get technically in his own right, probably an upgraded offense.
O-line too. O-line upgrade too.
O-line upgrade. A coach that's trusts him. The Saints trust him. And he's going at quarterback 18 to 20, right? And I think there's value for a guy that is looked at as quarterback 2 to 3 versus quarterback 1 to 2. So he's going to give you 4 to 6 spike weeks or usable weeks that are beyond your quarterback 1. He's going to be able to compete with Justin Herbert for fantasy points, I think. Things like that, like in some realms. I think that's someone that's, and this is what I mean why I don't take some of the elite guys. I'm not super excited for them but Derek Carr, you can't tell me that he can't throw 3 touchdowns 1 week, right? I think we can think there's some weeks that he throws 3 touchdowns. He does that. He's paying off round 10 value, more so than Geno Smith, who barely threw 3 touchdowns last year, more so than Trey Lance that didn't see the field last year, more so than Kenny Pickett, who we don't know about later on. There's a big teardrop, and I think it starts with Derek Carr for your QB2s.
Yeah, you mentioned Trey Lance. I mean, he could be. If he gets if they give him the job, if Purdy's not ready, does he take a major step forward? We don't know. We haven't seen anything from him, but we know that Derek Carr is going to be in a good situation. I'm kind of a little more on Geno because I think the DBs in Arizona and with the Rams are going to be a downgrade, and I think he's going to be able to pick them apart a little bit. So he could have some spike weeks in there, because he's still throwing to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett.
And I think, but my one thing I would say is I think Kenneth Walker steals a lot of touchdowns. If you look at Geno's actual numbers in the red zone, they were atrocious. They were absolutely atrocious. I think DK Metcalf had the most targets in the league, top 3 in the red zone or something, and did not put the numbers that a top 3 guy would have. And I think a lot of it came down to Geno's inability to just be good at the red zone. And I think Kenneth Walker just steals a ton of it.
Muy cierto. All right, close it out real quick. Strategy. A couple questions on strategy. How has your draft strategy changed for this year, and has it from years past?
It changed a little bit. I used to be more on the robust RBs, and I've been slowly moving over to. I did a lot of dual elite RB and anchor. This year, I think I'm full anchor. Like, it's going to be wide receivers. They are getting. I don't believe the wide receivers are more valuable than the running backs, player to player. But the way that the meta is being drafted, 24 end zone targets for DK. I don't think he even has 10 touchdowns. I think he has like 8 or something like that. So how's my draft change this year? I'm taking all anchor. So I'm gonna find myself an anchor running back, and it's just gonna be wide receiver down the gut. And my round 7s to round 10s, sign me up for David Montgomery. Sign me up for Najee, J.K. Dobbins. Those receptions are overrated for running backs. It's the most overrated stat in half PPR. Like, I don't care that A.J. Dillon caught 10 more passes last year to this year. That is 5 points. Spread it over 17 weeks. And we've noticed that receptions are worth more than rushing attempts, but receptions are not worth more than touchdowns. So get me the guys that go up the gut. Give me Brian Robinson. Give me A.J. Dillon. Give me J.K. Dobbins. I want those guys. I'm not worried about pass catching outside of Austin Eckler and CMC. I think those are the only 2 guys I personally care about if they're getting less or more targets.
Yeah, that's true. I don't see anybody having a lead.
Najee, I guess.
Najee could be.
But there's a huge fall off at 20 to 40 targets. They're really not much different. It's when guys get excessive, like Eckler or Leonard Fournette. Those kind of guys I think value more. So I think right now we're undervaluing a lot of these up the gut guys. And like I said, touchdowns are worth so much more. And Deontay Johnson just proved that last year. A man that had 1,000 yards and 80 catches and 0 touchdowns, right? Everybody hates him right now. So touchdowns are worth such a ton. So get me a running back that just goes up the gut.
I'll take him as my 3rd or 4th receiver, DJ. Last one. Who are you targeting late in drafts?
I'm targeting a guy I don't like for that from last year. MVS. I'm taking a lot of MVS and Tyler Higbee. Both guys I hated last year. Did not take any of them. Was correct on both in some right. I was correct on Tyler Higbee, but Tyler Higbee got so many receptions that I was in my right. I'm also wrong, but he didn't get that relevant. And I'm saying no, and I took no MVS, but I'm taking him this year. He's going at pick 170. That's where he should have been last year. The fact that people took MVS in the first 90 to 100 picks is crazy to me. He went from Hall of Fame quarterback to future Hall of Fame quarterback in an uncontested situation. He's the Kobe Fleener of wide receivers. And I think you can take him this year. I can take my MVS right now at pick 160. And if I get 2 to 3 contribution weeks, 1 spike week, he pays off easily.
You know what? I just hit the draft button on him earlier, just a couple hours ago in like around pick 180. And I was happy about it because, yeah, like what you said, he's going to have like 3 weeks that are usable. And I'm like, at that point, 100%,
And
100%.
then Tyler Higbee had like one of the highest targets in the game, like top 10 in targets in the league or something ridiculous. And I said it to everyone before season started. I was like, hey, what can the Rams do in offseason this year? And the answer is nothing. They cannot do nothing. Like they can't draft any real players because they don't have a first rounder. They only have a second. They can't spend money because they're busted at cap. So the receivers they have now, plus maybe whoever they draft in the second or third, is what they're stuck with. They're stuck with Kupp, Van Jefferson, Higbee, Benny Scaldrick, whatever his name is, and two guys. Like they're stuck with those guys. They're stuck in a pigeonhole. And I know people were like, well, Higbee's gonna get cut. It's been 4 months since people said that. Higbee's still on this team.
He's not.
Allen Robinson got traded. Like you thought they're gonna keep Allen Robinson over Higbee. Higbee had way more usage than Allen Robinson. So like Higbee's going like at pick 180 and like big board super flexes. I think it was going like 140, 150. And he had like 10th most targets. Matthew Stafford's going to pepper that man on the flats. And as long as he gets 30, 40 yards and like 6 catches, that's contribution week for a tight end. The only reason we're not talking about Higbee right now is because his touchdowns weren't there. But he was playing with 4 quarterbacks last year. So, of course, his touchdowns weren't there. So, well, 3 to 4, whatever amount of Rams quarterbacks that played last year, Higbee still had over 100 targets.
Yeah, I think he's you said it perfectly. Said it absolutely perfectly. Though, Mr. Scampers, just put it in the chat. I 100% haven't thought the name Tyler Higbee in 3 months. Thank you, Peng. So
Mr. Scampers knows a lot, and I love that about him because then I don't feel like I'm just speaking out of my butt because he's proven me right. He's like 24 end zone targets for DK. You know, like it's just one of those things that's I'm just saying that's right. Like I do all this research and I look at the trash and go, I want that. I want garbage. I want that right now. So Higbee's the guy I didn't take last year, but I saw 100 targets and I don't see him being moved. And if he gets traded, then great. Because that means that some team wants him, right? He goes up. If Tyler Higbee finds his way to the Cowboys, I guarantee you people are going to draft so much Higbee because Dak Prescott has that narrative of throwing to his tight ends.
Yeah, it's
so like what can they
he's
do?
Not going anywhere.
With them.
He's not going anywhere. He's gonna stay with the Rams and he's gonna get his 100 targets again. He's gonna probably get 60 to 70 catches and he's gonna be a tight end. He's gonna be a top 12 tight end. I think
it's gonna be the ugliest top 12 tight end we ever had, but he's going to be one, and you can get him at tight end 3, like tight end 3 prices.
Absolutely. Well, last one. Any favorite Mexican food ones? Any favorite Mexican food takes for you lately?
Oh man, I've been eating way more quesadillas than I should. So my wife actually has picked up making her own quesadillas and enchiladas. And quesadillas and enchiladas have just been so bad. She'll make a big like a Pyrex amount of it, and I'll eat the whole thing. I'll eat like 1/2 of the entire Pyrex of an enchilada. So it's really bad. It's actually like one of my favorite things right now next to quesadillas. So shout out to my wife on that one. Thank you. I'm fat now. So I've been really into enchiladas lately. So that's what she's been doing to me.
My all-time favorite food. Whenever my mom asks me what I want for my birthday, since I was like 6 years old, just enchiladas, mom, por favor. Mi amigo, this has been awesome. What do you have coming out?
So I started my own stream. It's with a partner of mine. It's actually her channel. I'm the second co-host to it. It's called Road to 150. We do it every Thursday. And some nights I do join her on Tuesday. Follow her. Her name's Hope Bishop. She's actually a female fantasy football drafter. Yes. And she won the playoff championship for Underdog. She's 1/2 of the champion. So she tied with somebody for the championship role. So that's as good as it gets, right? And we did our own show called Road to 150, which basically means that our goal is to get 150 teams in all these formats or a combination of, because we were heavy grinders. I drafted 700 teams last year. So yeah, follow the show, follow Hope Bishop. She is really good at what she does. She keeps me grounded and checks me every now and then for being dumb. And then I'm also doing a show for Fantasy Six Pack at some point. We are going to do like kind of tutorial videos, not necessarily a stream, of just like some quick tips on how to do best ball. Like everyone's getting new to this. There's a lot of traps you fall for. taking guys like Jarvis Landry. Like, I'll teach you how to get away from that, and I'll give you the contribution scoring. And that's basically it. Writing articles for Fantasy Six Pack, and I will be hopefully writing back with Stokastic this year. That's all I've been up to, man. I've been a very busy best ball season, as you can tell.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna be hitting you up, with little for some little tidbits here and there. Amigo, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. Let's see. And homemade enchiladas versus taquitos. I like them both. I like them both. And still enchiladas for me. And yes, thank you, Mr. Scampers. And yes. And yes, make sure to go to road to 150. I'm actually going to be going to that next, and I'll be checking you out tomorrow. Familia, thank you again for joining us. And also one more time, muchas gracias to our invitado de lujo, Peng. Davis Peng's Picks. Find him at Twitter. Find him there on Twitter. You can find me at Jorge Martin 17 on Twitter. Also, make sure you're going to follow us on Familia FFB on YouTube. Go to Underdog, use that promo code Familia23. I'm going to match you up to $100, and also make sure to go to fantasypoints.com, get that 2023 subscription. And lastly, thank you to Spotify for podcasters for putting our independent podcast out there on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Muchas gracias, everybody. NFL draft next week. Enjoy it. We're going to finally know who's going to go number one. But right now, we know you guys are number one. Muchas gracias. And remember, todos somos familia. Salud.